All right, so starting the audio now and opening up the script. All right. So this is take one of the entire thing. Let's see how far we can get. So it's the beginning of the year and you're sitting down with your board members for the first time and you're thinking to yourself, how well should I know these people and how do I get this year started right? And so my name's Ty Pfeiffer. I'm the current internal vice president for UVSA South, and today I'll be talking about how to start your year right with your new board. I know school's starting out for a lot of us, and some of us are even in our board positions or officer positions for the first time ever. And it can be intimidating, but something to remember is you and the rest of your board together will be sharing the victories and defeats and the happiness and the woes of the year. And so it's pretty important to have a positive relationship for these people. I think there are three very important things to keep in mind when starting a new year with a new board. The first of which is to set expectations. The second is to create a safe and positive environment, and the third is to have fun. Obviously the cliche, have fun, balancing the good and the bad. And so the first point that we'll go into is setting expectations. So setting expectations is everything from when officers should respond by, what responsibilities is given to who, and so on and so forth. But when setting expectations, there are a few important things to keep in mind as well. When you set expectations, you should keep in mind, firstly, are you going to be held accountable for these expectations, and are you going to be able to meet these expectations 100% of the time? Sometimes for me, I think in terms of the ideal Ty that kind of only exists in my mind, and I think, yeah, Ty could do that, but I have to watch myself and think, okay, would real Ty be able to meet these expectations 100% of the time? And if you can't meet the expectations that you're trying to impose, then maybe you should change them a little bit or maybe see some alternatives. The second thing to keep in mind is that your board members are volunteers. And so everyone is involved with VSA because they're passionate and they want to be involved and they want to help out. But something you should remind yourself of is that VSA isn't necessarily putting food on the table. You can't treat VSA members like you would treat employees in terms of the workload and whatnot. Of course, professionalism is a completely different aspect. But keep in mind that this is a volunteer-based organization and volunteers run it. And the third thing, which kind of goes along with the last point, is that people have lives. Even though VSA is a responsibility that they've agreed to by being an officer or board member, you have to remember that they do have other priorities in their lives, and sometimes VSA doesn't take top priority. So those are the three things you should keep in mind when setting expectations. Some other things to keep in mind for expectations is that it's also important to set expectations that go beyond sort of the business-like aspect of the expectations for the year. So things in terms of like reaching out when you need help, making sure people ask for help is important, and sometimes it's very difficult for people. Another thing would be to, let the president or vice presidents know when someone needs a break, because no one can go on forever, and sometimes people have a really rough week, and so it's important to kind of have that visible so that people know that if they are running low, then they do have that support from the rest of the board. Even if you're not a president or a VP position, you can still reach out to your fellow board members and say like, oh, hey, just making sure they're on top of their expectations or asking if they need help. And obviously when you do so, you want to reach out in sort of a positive and a helpful manner as opposed to an accusatory manner. And this leads us into our next point, which is creating a safe and positive environment. And so what I mean by safe and positive environment is whenever someone volunteers an idea or whenever any sort of discussion is had, we don't want to have anyone shutting down other ideas, and we don't want to have anything shut down without reason. And so as opposed to, say, on one side, say a new member suggested an idea for an event, and then an older member says, oh no, we've tried that in the past, it didn't work, and then kind of move on from there. I would say that's not as positive as it could be. And so a way to think about it is to say like, okay, well, we've tried that in the past and this is the problem that we ran into and that's why we decided not to do it. Do you have any ideas for maybe responding to these problems that we had with it? And you'd be surprised, sometimes there are new ideas that have never been thought of before that come up that can fix some of these problems. And if not, at least the person has the closure that their idea was given consideration and that their idea was actually put onto the table and they feel, important. And they are important. All the board members are important. And that's something you want to reinforce. Creating a positive and safe environment also goes into making sure that everyone feels like their emotions matter. Even though we like to say that when you're operating in a business environment, such as being on the board for VSA, we want everyone to be professional. But sometimes everyone has their bad days, and just because someone is having their bad day doesn't invalidate any of the ideas or anything that they're saying. And so just being in the support group and making sure that you are being a positive influencer rather than negatively responding to people is a good way to increase the bonds of trust in your board. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about is to have fun. And it seems kind of, self-explanatory to have fun. Obviously, you want to have fun in everything you do, and that's kind of the cliche that goes in all the movies and whatnot. But when I say have fun, I mean balancing the good and the bad. And so, for example, when you're doing event planning, it can be very stressful, it can be very hard, and it can be a very arduous process. Event planning is what takes up most of our time, and so it's the thing we focus on the most. But that doesn't mean it has to be hard, it doesn't have to be a bad time. When you're planning an event, make sure that in the board meetings, even though it is professional, you can still have fun, make jokes, keep the environment and the atmosphere lighthearted. And then, obviously, when you get to the event, a lot of times whenever things don't go exactly according to plan, people are very quick to kind of beat themselves up. People are quick to accuse others of why it's not going perfectly. But when you get into an event, you can't really ever expect it to go perfectly. It's not going to go perfectly, and that's the nature of event planning. And so the best you can do is roll with the punches and make the best with what you got. And when you do, and you keep a positive outlook, it really does show, especially if you have something, an event such as a summit or a conference where there's a lot of attendee staff interaction. You don't want to have the staff bringing down the mood by seeming stressed and having, sour faces on all the time. You want your staff to be positive, and you can be positive just by putting your mind to it. And the last thing is for coming after event planning, there's usually the pros and cons or the pros and deltas that's done. And the important thing to do is give credit where credit's due. And it's very easy in pros and deltas for staff members to more easily come up with cons and deltas than they can with pros. And so that's a good opportunity for any individual outside of their committee or outside of their responsibilities to step in and say I think you did really good with this, and really keep a positive spin on sort of the whole conversation, just keeping it in a positive light so that it's enjoyable. And once again, going back to one of the first points, is everyone who's working on events for VSA are volunteers. And so to keep that in mind and to really give them praise when they deserve it. And one thing that I like to do is I'll go on to say the group chat or maybe on the email or something, and just give shout outs to people hey, shout out to Brian for staying after the event extra long and helping to clean up, or hey, thanks, shout out to this person for transporting all of our materials and organizing them, and so on and so forth. So today I talked about 3 important things to keep in mind when you're starting a year with a new board. The first being setting expectations, the second being to create a safe and positive environment, and the third to have fun and balance the goods and the bads. And so I hope that you learned something from this video that you can take back to your own board, and hopefully something that can influence you positively for the upcoming year. Remember that you'll be spending a whole year with your board, so make sure to make the best of it and have a great time with them. Build really good relationships with them, and you'll have a great year. So that is the first episode of the UNAVSA-13 Lightning Talks. Thank you for tuning in. Please make sure to subscribe for the next Lightning Talks coming up, and leave a comment letting us know what topics you'd like to hear about. Once again, my name's Ty Pfeiffer. Thanks for tuning in. Hey UNAVSA, if you'd like to learn more about how to get involved and how to go about applying to present a lightning talk, please shoot me an email at ty.pfeiffer@unavsa.org. I'll put it over here on the right so you guys can see. And lightning talks are generally just videos trying to have VSAs or UVSAs or regions highlighted in terms of something they do well or something that they excel at, and having them present over their knowledge and sharing it with the rest of the continent. So if you'd like to hear more, if you're interested, shoot me an email. I can send you some documents about how it goes down, and we can go from there. Thanks for tuning in again, and I'll see you guys next time.